Good morning, everyone. My name is Linda McGinnis, and I am so grateful for every single person in this room. Thank you for everything that you do. I'm a senior fellow at EAN, and my policy pitch today is called Driving Change, bringing Norway's massive success in transportation electrification to Vermont. The pitch was done in collaboration with Dave Roberts of VEIC and Drive Electric Vermont. And let me make sure I'm doing this correctly here. All right. And we wanted to recognize that the first best transportation solution is to get us all out of our personal vehicles. However, we also recognize that many Vermonters depend heavily on vehicles for work, for services, and for their families. And so this pitch is looking at how we can get as many of those vehicles as possible, as close to zero emissions as possible. So many of you know some of this, but what are the main benefits of EVs? First, it's simply cheaper to maintain and operate an EV compared to any gas-powered vehicle. As we heard earlier, you have the equivalent of $1.50 per gallon to fill it up, and there's virtually no maintenance. It's sort of like driving around a really large smartphone. In addition, smart EV charging is helping to put downward pressure on electric rates. And many of you may not know, but Vermont spent almost $1 billion last year on gas and diesel. Going electric could have saved our state nearly $600 million, which is money that stays in the pockets of Vermonters. Secondly, it's obviously better for our environment and our health. Zero emissions means zero emissions. And thirdly, it's just a better experience. EVs have already shown that electric motors have better performance and better safety. And as an EV owner myself, I can tell you they're just more fun. So what can we learn from Norway? If you look at Vermont's per capita EV ownership, we're doing pretty well compared to the US average. Not nearly as well as California, which is the leader in the United States. But if you consider Norway, it's the world's leader. On a per capita basis, they have 10 times the EV ownership as Vermont. And over 60% of their new vehicle sales are now EVs. And their goal is to reach 100% by 2025. So with Vermont's current policies in place, how are we doing? The good news is that over the past 5 years, we've had about 30% annual increase in EVs. And if we continue going at this pace, we might actually reach about 17,000 vehicles by 2025. But our comprehensive energy plan says that we need to have 50,000 EVs on the road by then to meet our goals. And if we want to meet the Paris agreements, it's 90,000. I know that seems like a daunting number, but Norway surpassed 50,000 in 2015 with far fewer options available and far lower technology. And in 2019, they surpassed 250,000 EVs in their country. So how did they do that? Well, they had ambitious goals, and what they put behind it was a comprehensive set of policies and sustained funding. Okay, so what are some of the policies that they put in place? The bottom line for their policies is that they make electric transportation cheaper than gas-powered options at every level. They made the purchase price cheaper through no sales taxes, cash for clunkers, and no registration fees. They also made all of their electric public transport move towards electric transit, and that includes their vast fleet of ferries. Number 3, they make vehicle operation costs even cheaper through free public charging and parking, lower power costs, and they have expanded their public charging to over 10,000 public charging stations for all income levels across the country. And finally, most importantly, they generate sustained funding through a principle they call polluter pays. They put a sales tax on high emissions vehicles, and the higher the emissions, the higher the fees. And what they generate from that is applied to low or zero emissions vehicles. And they've had a carbon tax on fossil fuel drilling since 1990, and it hasn't hurt their economy. So what are we pitching for Vermont? We need a comprehensive set of policies with sustained funding that, number 1, reduces EV costs relative to comparable fossil fueled options, with incentives targeted to low and middle income Vermonters, including shared vehicles, until 2025 or until EVs represent 15% of our market, whichever comes first. This could be met through a combination of TCI funding, Tier 3, and a fee bait. Put a fee on higher emissions vehicles and apply that to incentives and cash for clunkers. Number 2, we need to require that all public transit, school buses and transit buses, be electric by 2025, and use public funds to pay for the marginal additional costs of replacing those vehicles. Number 3, we need to rapidly expand our charging infrastructure to ensure that every Vermonter in every rural area and every urban area, especially in places where there are low-income people, have access to charging. And the utilities will play an extremely important role here, as they have in Vermont and even more so in Massachusetts and Connecticut. And then it's important to ramp up our building codes to ensure that every new residential and commercial building is EV ready going forward. And finally, we need to ensure that we continue to invest in marketing and outreach programs to make sure that people actually understand what the benefits are for them. Because ultimately, what have we got to lose?